There is a new Star Trek exhibit at the ComicCon Museum, and it just had a soft opening this weekend at ComicCon Special Edition. I'm joined by Roddenberry, and I'm super excited to talk about this. So, museum just had kind of a soft start at the going of ComicCon. How was the experience and of checking it out, and how were you involved with the museum?
So the museum contacted me a couple of years ago, actually now, and I'm on the board of advisors, and of course I got to sort of hear how the museum was going to, present itself, and the idea of a Gene Roddenberry exhibit hadn't really existed at that point, and that was fine. I was proud to be a part of it and see who they were going to honor, and see who they were going to honor, and I know Pac-Man was one of them, Batman's been one of them, and those are the character honorees. But as we got closer to Comic-Con Special Edition, we talked about doing a Gene Roddenberry exhibit. The reason being is it is his centennial in this year, 2021. And so we were looking for ways to celebrate him. And what I find most fascinating about my father, and this sounds weird coming from his son, but it's not that he created Star Trek. It's his entire life and career before Star Trek, which led up to his creation of the show. So I think that's an incredible story, and I wanted to share it.
Was there any pieces at the museum or like a display or anything that surprised you or brought back a memory of like, oh, I remember seeing that, or just anything that was like, oh, because like if you know the material, you know your father, Star Trek and all that, but was there anything there that stood out to you?
Well, we have kept an incredible archive of materials, most of it written, but my father was a writer, and like most writers, he kept all of his stuff. And of course we have all the scripts and everything from the shows, but one thing that I saw that I had completely forgotten about was actually from my mother. She had one of the original scripts from The Cage, and before it was called The Cage, it was called The Menagerie, and you might know that name because later on they took that name and did the two-part episode from The Cage. Anyhow, it's the original script, the pages are nice and brown and all that, and it's got her notes on it. And we're going to actually try to get them to open it up because right now it's just the script itself, but inside she's got acting notes she wrote to herself. And I just think that's fascinating from a 55-year-old plus story where the writer has put notes for themselves. It's just such a huge piece of history.
Oh yeah, that's definitely cool.
And she was number one. She was, second in command back in the era, because I was just asked a question at our panel yesterday, and someone who had been on the USS Enterprise, the naval ship, the aircraft carrier, and my father had visited that, and there was a rumor circulating the ship that my father said to the captain, one day this ship will be half women and half men, and apparently one of the officers kind of scoffed at that and thought it was not possible. But of course my father showed it in his first episode back in 1964 was The Cage, I think, something around then.
Nice. And speaking of your panel, how did the panel go?
I mean, the panel went great. We had the panel with 3 members from the Comic-Con Museum, 3 pivotal members who made it happen and who were very welcoming when we came to them with the idea for a Gene Roddenberry exhibit. It was a fantastic panel.
It's also an interesting perspective for you because this is an iconic, famous person, but it's also your father. So what is it like going to a museum and seeing it, having those two kind of duality things existing for you to experience it?
That's a very interesting question. I've lived with that most of my life. As a young boy, after my father passed away, there was this sort of identity crisis. Who am I? Am I trying to be my father? Do I need to follow in his footsteps? That sort of thing. And then, I did a documentary called Trek Nation that came out in 2012. And during the making of that documentary, I got to speak to so many people that were in different facets of his life, whether it was personal or business or people who knew him or didn't know him. And I really was able to come to I guess a sense of my own identity, which is just being me, but still loving this philosophy behind Star Trek. I do not need to be Gene Roddenberry. I do not need to be a writer. I do not even need to be in Hollywood. But I truly do believe in the Star Trek philosophy, the infinite diversity from infinite combinations. And so I am representing that in the best way I can, whether it's trying to make sure or ensure that it's in the current Star Treks or through our family foundation. So I'm very comfortable with my identity not being Gene Roddenberry.
Well, it's a great way that you're able to continue a legacy from a very unique perspective. Is there anything else you'd like to add about your Comic-Con experience, the museum, or just anything in general of what's next for you?
Well, I mean, I'd love to share a little bit about the museum exhibit itself. So what you're getting at the ComicCon Museum Gene Roddenberry exhibit is certainly a look into the man. And that was very important to us. As I said earlier, his history before Star Trek is fascinating. It really is. He was a World War II pilot flying over 89 missions in South Pacific. He went from there to becoming a transcontinental pilot for Pan Am. And he actually was deadheading on a flight from Syria and crashed in the Syrian desert. He was one of 11 survivors, I believe, or 17, I can't remember. And after that, he hung up his wings and became a member of the LAPD and became a sergeant, rose to the rank of sergeant, and then started writing speeches for the chief of police. After that, the shows like Dragnet were coming out, and they were asking cops for stories. And so he sold a few stories and then realized that he could write as well. And then started writing cops and cop shows and westerns. He did all of this before Star Trek. So he had an incredibly diverse career, and he had seen the world, and he had had experiences with other cultures and nationalities and people. And I think that really helped him grow this idea of a united future. And he was able to see the imbecilic sort of behaviors we have when we judge by form and idea, and was able to say, this is crazy. 100 years from now, we're all going to be one united species. So let's work towards that now. Anyhow, I think his life is fascinating, certainly from a son's point of view, but also from, as you said, a fan's point of view. So I hope we achieve that with this exhibit, and I hope people come down and check it out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your con.
I certainly will. Thank you.
And I'm Kari Lane with FANVERSATION. Thank you for watching.